if I represent life as a big box like this is life on Earth. Life can be divided in two. And another one bites the dust. So life can be divided in two. Plants on the one side and animals on the other side. Animals can move, plants cannot move. Easy. Also, plants are usually green. Do you know why? Chlorophyll, exactly. So plants can produce their own sugar, animals cannot. So plants here will be represented on the first row. So the first row here has the fossil plants that I want you to see. So tree, leaves, and some stromatolites. So you will have to look at them and understand what you're looking at. So plants are in row number 1. The animals are in the rest of the room. So now in animals, you can divide them in two once again. So divide the animal box, but by the way, this is something you should already note. In general, you must take notes all the time. Your first year at the university, you must learn how to take notes, and you must take notes all the time. So animals can be divided in two once again. The invertebrates and the vertebrates. The difference between the two being invertebrates have no backbone, vertebrates do have a backbone. So no backbone, backbone. Or stated otherwise, invertebrates usually have an exoskeleton or a shell. So if you don't know that word, exoskeleton. So external skeleton, exoskeleton. Or they have a shell, and vertebrates have an internal skeleton. We are vertebrates because our skeleton is inside us. It's not outside, like a seashell, for example. So let's start with the vertebrates. So the vertebrates are the last two rows of the room. So row 7 and row 8. And in vertebrates, you have here 4 different types of animal. Well, let's first divide them in two. So we divide them in two. First, the vertebrates that lay eggs in the water, which are the fish and amphibians. Fish and amphibians lay their egg in water. And you have the vertebrates that lay their eggs out of the water, which are the reptiles. And reptiles can be themselves divided in 4. So you redivide in 4, and now you understand why you should take notes, because otherwise you cannot follow that. So, and the reptiles are divided into 4. The synapsids, the anapsids, the diapsids, and the archosaurs. So as I told you, there will be a lot of new words. These are probably 4 completely new words to you. They are all explained at row 7, 8, and 7. So they are all explained at rows 7 and 8. So don't worry too much if you don't understand those 4 words and if you cannot spell them correctly. You will see them at the back of the room. Now the invertebrate side. So on the invertebrate side, you can divide the invertebrates into two. Those that have a shell and those that have an exoskeleton. The invertebrates with an exoskeleton are the crustaceans, trilobite, so crustaceans, trilobites, which are over there, and here you have the eurypterid, so the sea scorpions. Eurypterids. So once again, do not worry too much if you don't know these words. This is row number 2. So what you need to remember here is to go to row number 2 to see what are these animals. And now invertebrates with a shell. So in the invertebrates with a shell, you have almost everything that is left in the room. So 3, 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6. So here, that's why you will find your bivalves, and cephalopods, and gastropods. And once again, refer to rows 3, 4, 5, and 6 to know exactly how to spell these words and what these animals look like. So this is the basic classification of life and how it is represented in that room. So from plants all the way to vertebrates at the bottom of the room. One group that I would like to emphasize, those with a shell, among those with the shell, is a group called the echinoderms. Echinoderms. Because in that group, you will see the starfish, for example. That group has a very fun, unusual body plan, if I may say. So if you look at the starfish, it's organized like this. And you can see that the starfish can be divided in 5, like this. And a starfish is basically a repetition of the same thing 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is called a pentaradiate symmetry. Pentaradiate symmetry. So radiate means around, and penta means 5. So 5 times around, because it's 5 times the repetition of the same segment of the body. So the echinoderms are located, what row is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, it's row number 6. So if you want to know better what's happening there, it's row number 6. You will see that all echinoderms have that pentaradiate body plan. So this is row number 1. So on row number 1 you have all the plant material. So here, for example, you have the stromatolite, which has an age ranging from Precambrian to present, which means that the first one are found from the Precambrian, like these ones, but there are still stromatolites forming today. So the stromatolites are not dead. And the do not miss, which means the characters, the features that you must see on those stromatolites is the lithification, because stromatolites are made of fossilized bacterial mats. What does that mean? It means that every single of this layer is a former bacterial mat that got fossilized. And you can clearly see them here. And if you look at this one, for example, you can also clearly see the layers that are made of bacterial mats that got piled onto each other, laid down some calcium carbonate, and then died off and were replaced by a new bacterial mat. Here you have the leaf imprints. So leaf imprints first appear in the fossil record in the Devonian with the first trees, and of course you still find leaf imprints today because there are still leaves. So what you must see on those leaf imprints is the midrib and the veins. So let's look, for example, at this one. So this one has a very clear midrib along the length, and the tiny veins on the side are also clearly visible. And you have a lot of examples here. And here now amber. Amber is fossilized tree sap. So tree sap is the liquid inside the tree that transports the nutrient. This is what amber looks like. So it's yellowish in color and slightly translucent. And the last piece of plant on the first row is the silicified wood. So silicified wood appears in the fossil record with the first trees. And here you can find a very nice piece of silicified wood. It really looks like wood on the outside. And you can see on that polished surface, you have the growth rings of the former wood that was turned into silica. And you can see the growth rings that are very clear. That enables you to identify that silicified wood. Now we move to the arthropods. So the arthropods, like this crab, have what is called an exoskeleton. So exoskeleton means external skeleton, and that external skeleton is made of articulated pieces. So here you can see on the pincer you have one block here that is articulated to the top of the pincer, which enables the pincer movement. Here you have another block that is articulated to that block on this side and articulated to that block on this side. So every single part of an arthropod is made of little articulated pieces. So that's a crustaceans. And crustaceans originated in the Cambrian and are still alive today. This is not a fossil, this is a modern crab. But you have also fossil arthropods, like for example this Eurypterid. So Eurypterid belongs to the Chelicerate. We will see what is a Chelicerate during the class, so don't worry too much about that word now. The Eurypterids only lived in the Paleozoic, and just like the crustaceans, they are made of articulated bits. So you can see these bits are articulated to each other, and you can see on the legs are also made of bits, pieces that are articulated to each other. And Eurypterids are known to be animals that really looked very much like scorpions. So they are very often called sea scorpions. Hello, we are going online. Okay, that's a trilobite. So trilobite, as their name indicates, have a body that is made of 3 lobes. So 3 lobes. 1 here, the left lobe, 2, the right lobe, and 3, the middle lobe. So left lobe, axial lobe, and right lobe. So that's why they are called trilobite. 1, 2, 3 lobes. So, and here you can see that organization very clearly on that fossil. 1, 2, 3 lobes. And there's another example right here. 1, 2, 3 lobes. So we find a lot of them in South Africa, so it's a very important fossil to know. It's also a very important fossil because they are very abundant in the Paleozoic, so it's a marker for the Paleozoic era. Here, just a slight add-on on something that we will see in class, the difference between a mold and a cast. So, when you have an empty surface like this, a concave surface like this, we call this a mold. And then when you have infilling matter that goes inside that mold and gives you a 3D representation of it, this part is called the cast. So the cast is the infilling of the mold. So if you put some material into the mold and then you make a cast of it, that's the cast and that's the mold. So last fossil of the row is the trace fossils. So the trace fossils, as you can see here, you find them from the Cambrian to present because they are just trace of activity of an animal. So the activity of an animal means that there's no body fossils. It's just the remains of what an animal did a long time ago. So for example, here you have some footprints running here along that piece of rock, and these are the footprints that were made by a trilobite. So the trilobite was running like this along the prints. It's like a shongololo. It has tiny little legs under its body, and it was walking on that surface, leaving its footprints. And here you have another type of trace fossil, which are coprolites. Coprolites are little piece of poo. This is crap. Fossilized crap. So it's really rock. Huh? It's not actual actual crap, but it has been turned into a fossil, so completely turned into rock. Okay. Third row now. So the third row, we go into the mollusk. So the animals with a shell. This is the first mollusk we will see. It's called the nautilus. So nautilus, and it's a mollusk with a coiled shell. So the shell is coiled like this. If we compare to the drawing, this is how the shell is coiled. And nautiloids, or nautilus particularly, are easily identifiable because their body is made of little rooms, which are called chambers, and each room is separated by a suture line. So that suture line that you can see here, and the suture line that you can see here, and the suture line here. So these horizontal lines are the suture lines, and these suture lines are straight. They are very simple. So if you have a coiled shell with simple suture lines, it means you're looking at a nautilus. Additionally, you can look at the siphuncle if it's visible. So the siphuncle, which you can see here, is that structure there. So you can see I put a little piece of black marker to locate it. So the nautiloid is the coiled version of an orthocere. The orthocere, as you can see here, is exactly like a nautiloid. It has simple sutures, horizontal sutures, and a central siphuncle. So I can show you the siphuncle is right here. So simple suture, central siphuncle, but this time the shell is uncoiled, so the shell is straight. Orthoceres are found in the Paleozoic, so just like trilobite, they are from the same era. The nautiloid over there is found from the Mesozoic until today. So if you find an uncoiled orthocere, you're in the Paleozoic. If you find a coiled nautiloid, you are in the Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, or more modern times. A belemnite is also a cephalopod mollusk, and it looks very much like an orthocere, except it has no sutures. So you can look for the sutures as much as you want, you will never see them on a belemnite. So that's what gives up the identification as a belemnite. It's just like an orthocere without the sutures. And belemnites are found only in the Mesozoic, so they are very important fossils for stratigraphy because they are very abundant and very easy to identify. They look very much like rifle bullets. So very often people think they are rifle bullets, but no, actually they are fossils. So these ones, I was not sure where to put them because they fit nowhere. These are corals. Corals are not mollusks. They are not very useful for stratigraphy because they are present from the Cambrian to today. So this is a mix of fossil and modern coral. So you can see they live in colonies. And in these colonies, inside, if you look, each little cell is an individual. It is one coral. And if you look carefully inside, you will see little walls. If the camera can make it a little less blurry, that would be nice. So inside each little cell, you can see tiny walls, and these walls are called septa. So let's see, here you can see them very clearly, the tiny walls inside, and here also you can see on that one the tiny walls inside the mouth of the coral. So here about corals, one thing that you need to know is about the shape of the coral. So that one you can see is a very flat, a very stocky, robust shape. That one has a taller and more branched shape. So why is that difference? Why is that a difference? It's because of current. So if you have a high energy environment with a lot of stream, with a lot of debris flying in the water, you will have corals that are shorter and more robust like this one. On the opposite, if you have a low energy environment like a lagoon, for example, with few energy, with no current or no stream, then you will have a very ramified branching coral and very tall. So it's really a matter of the strength of the current. No strength and very strong. So we are back to mollusks now. Row number 4 here. So here we're looking at gastropods. So the gastropods are also mollusks. They have a coiled shell like the ammonites, but the difference with the ammonite is that the shell is coiled in a conical manner. So even if the gastropod looks very flat like this, you can still see the conical coiling. So first difference is that the shell is conical and not flat like an ammonite. The second difference is that there is no chambers. There is only one chamber in mollusk, so there are no sutures because there are no limits between the chambers. So here on that one, for example, you can see it's only one big room inside the mollusk. So these two are modern ones, and here you have a very nice fossil one, and here is another fossil. So that one is a mold of the actual shell of a mollusk. Okay. The next one is the uncoiled ammonite. So the uncoiled ammonite. So maybe first I should show you the ammonite first. So the actual ammonite first, the regular ammonite that you can see here. So ammonites are coiled animals, just like the nautils. So the nautils is over there. So it's a coiled animal, just like the nautil. Very difficult to differentiate from the nautil, except if you can see the sutures. if you can see the suture on an ammonite, let's put some light on this one. You see the suture, that's this patterning here. You can see how complex it is. So this complex patterning, that's the walls between the chambers of the ammonite. So the extremely complex sutures, that's what characterizes the ammonites. And and you can see here on the sectioned ammonite, you can see those little rooms that I was talking about. So the ammonite was growing from the center toward the outside and building a new room every time it was growing up. So the big difference here between the ammonite and the nautile on the other side is the complex sutures. And now we move, and ammonites are very important, because they lived only in the Mesozoic, so it's a very good stratigraphic marker. And here we move to the uncoiled ammonite, which is exactly like the ammonites we've seen before, except the shell is uncoiled. So you can see here, the shell is not coiled like it used to be in the other ammonites. So these ammonites lived only in the Cretaceous. It is very important that you remember it, because it's probably examinable. Wink, wink. Yes, I say that for you. Here you will make sure, if you see something that looks like an uncoiled ammonite, you will have to make sure that you see the complex sutures to be certain that it's an ammonite and not an orthocere. Remember the orthocere over there? Complex suture, simple sutures. Okay, we move to row number 5. So row number 5, first the graptolites.
Just showing pictures of graptolites.
So the graptolites are animals that lived only in the Paleozoic. So it's a good stratigraphic marker, and they look like miniature saws. So I will try to show you a nice one. So when you look at that rock, and if you make it shine in the light, you see those shiny little bits. That's the graptolite. So that shiny little part that you can see here, for example, that's a graptolite. So I strongly encourage you to Google the word graptolite to have better picture of what they look like, because they are not easy to see on the camera. But you see, that's the tiny stripe of shiny rock. That's your graptolites. So now the bivalves. Oops, sorry. So now we're going to see the difference between bivalves here and brachiopods here. So the difference between bivalves and brachiopod is the symmetry. A bivalve, just like a brachiopod, is made of 2 valves, so 2 shells. One shell on the top, one shell on the bottom. And in bivalves, the 2 shells are the same. So they are symmetricals. So 2 shells are the same. So you can say the symmetry runs between the shells. But if you look at a brachiopod now, so here we look at the brachiopod, and you take a brachiopod like this, you will see that the 2 shells of the brachiopods are not the same. So one shell is a little bigger than the other. And if you look at this one, for example, that's even more obvious. You have the top shell here and the bottom shell here, and you can see the bottom shell is not the same as the top shell. So in brachiopods, the symmetry runs through the shell and not between the shells. So that's how you make the difference between a brachiopod and a bivalve. You look at the symmetry. If the 2 shells are the same, it's a bivalve. If the 2 shells are different and the symmetry runs in the middle of the shells like this, it is a brachiopod. So now how do you use these animals for stratigraphy? Brachiopods and bivalves are both on Earth still the Cambrian, but brachiopods were dominant in the Paleozoic, and bivalves over there are dominant since the Mesozoic, and they are still dominant today. So you have more chance to find brachiopods in the Paleozoic, and you have more chance to find bivalves in the Mesozoic and Cenozoic. Okay, let's move to row number 6, if I'm not mistaken. So let's start from the other side, because this area is busy. So row number 6 has the echinoderms. So the echinoderms here, you can see, have a pentaradiate symmetry or pentaradial symmetry. So the pentaradial symmetry here, you can see, it just means that echinoderms are made of 5 times the same thing. So here you can see the 5 branch of the starfish. It's 5 times the same part of the organism. And same thing if you look at the bottom, you can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times the same type of organization. So pentaradiate means 5 times encircle the same thing. So here the starfish is really easy to identify because it has 5 arms, not particularly interesting for stratigraphy. But it illustrates very well the system of pentaradial symmetry. Now the crinoids. So crinoids, also called coeloelis, they look very much like a plant. Like a plant, they have a stem that is called the stalk, and they have leaves that we call arms made of pinnules. So they look very much like plants, but they are not plants because they can move. That part of the stalk can break at this level, and this part can swim. So they are not plants, they can move. And just like other echinoderms, they have a pentaradial symmetry. So it's not easy to see the pentaradial symmetry. So what you're looking at now is a piece of the stalk here. And you can see here on the surface, it has little ribs. And these ribs are the articulation surface of each element of the stalk. So these little ribs, let's do the focus on the ribs. Let's find a more conspicuous one. Yeah, here you can see them. So these tiny ribs, if you were to count them, you would find a multiple of 5, like 50 ribs, or maybe 100 ribs, or maybe 200 ribs, but it would be a multiple of 5. So now, this little piece of stalk look very much like the orthosphere that we've seen before, because it looks like an uncoiled shell with a hole in the middle that would be the siphuncle. So it's not an orthosphere because first you can see the ramifications on the side. Look at those tiny branches that you can see. They are broken, but a shell of an orthosphere won't have branches. And you can see the articulations, the ribs here. So because you can see the ribs, it means that each little segment was articulated to each other, unlike the pieces of a shell which are solidly attached to each other. So that thing was flexible. And that's the main difference with an orthosphere, the flexibility of that stalk. Okay, last echinoderm, the echinoids. Echinoids are sea urchin. They originate in the Ordovician and they still live today. This is, for example, a modern echinoderm. And this is the fossil equivalent of exactly the same animal. So on that one here, you can clearly see the pentaradial symmetry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now what you're looking at, and if you flip it like that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And how to identify an echinoid? It's very simple. You look for the ambulacrum and interambulacrum area or plates. So what's the ambulacrum? It's the area that you can see here through which the animal would stick its little feet out. So echinoids, sea urchins, have tiny feet, tiny tentacles, and these tentacles will come out of the ambulacral area. Ambulacral is like an ambulance. It means moving fast. So they can move, not so fast, but they can move through the little limbs that come out of their ambulacral zone. And if you look carefully at this one, for example, you can see the tiny holes on the ambulacral zone. And then the interambulacral plates are the ones located in between the ambulacral zone. So that's the interambulacral plates, and that's where you find the spines. So the spines that you can see on that specimen here. Here they are very small, but they can be quite big. And so the spines are attached to the interambulacral plates. So the ambulacrum is for the feet, and the interambulacrum is for the spines. And that's how you identify an echinoid, by locating those areas on the fossil. So now we move to the final part, the vertebrates, so row 7 and row number 8. So first, the most basic vertebrate that you can find is the fish. So the fish have the typical vertebrate body plan, which means they have a backbone and they have an internal skeleton. So it's clearly visible on that specimen. Here you can see the skull and the body of the fish, and here you have the backbone of the fish that is clearly visible. So the backbone is made of tiny units like that we call vertebrae. Vertebrae that give their name vertebrates to that group. So fish originate in the Cambrian, and then they quickly diversify and becomes terrestrial, and they turn into amphibians. So this is an amphibian here. So amphibians are easy to identify because they have a flat skull, as you can see. It's not deformation due to fossilization, it's the actual shape of the skull. So the skull is flat, the surface is pitted, so it has that texture that is very much like that of a crocodile. The eyes are on the top, which indicates you that the animal was hunting with its head immersed in the water and the eyes were bulging out of the water. So it really gives you up the fact that it was an animal living in water. And the snout also is rounded, very characteristic of amphibians, and you still see that on modern amphibians like frogs, for example, the rounded snout. So amphibians originate in the Devonian, so they are quite typical of the Devonian, and then they are still existing today, so Devonian to present. Then we move to reptiles. So reptiles, unlike amphibians and fish, lay their eggs on land, and here we have the first group of reptile, which is called the anapsid reptile. So what does anapsid means? It means that the skull has no opening in the temporal region. So the temporal region is the region at the back of the skull, behind the orbit, and if there is no hole in that region, it means you have an anapsid skull. If you have one hole, it's a synapsid skull, so that's these guys. If you have two holes, that's a diapsid skull, like the guys we will see later. So here, for example, you look at that skull, you see the orbit is there, and here you have the region at the back of the orbit, the temporal region, and that region is not perforated by any hole, so this is an anapsid. And same thing for that guy. You can see the nostrils here, you can see the orbit here, and here at the back of the orbit you can see there's no hole, so this is an anapsid skull. So these reptiles are very abundant in the Karoo, so in South Africa, and most of the reptiles that we will see now are found abundantly in South Africa, like, for example, the synapsids here. So here you have a synapsid that is called the Gorgonopsian, which comes from the Hafrenate area in the Eastern Cape. And you can see the orbit is there, and at the back of the orbit there's only one hole. One hole at the back of the orbit means you're looking at a synapsid. So we also call them mammal-like reptiles. So some of them were big, some of them were smaller, and they eventually gave rise to mammals much later in their evolution. So they originate in the Carboniferous, and by the Jurassic they will give birth to mammals. So one temporal fenestra, synapsid. And we move now to the Diapsida. Diapsida, which means not one but two temporal fenestrae. So here you look at that skull here compared to that. So please note there is the orbit here, so the eye socket, and at the back of the orbit you have one hole on the top, one hole at the bottom, one hole on the top here, one hole at the bottom. So these are the two temporal fenestrae that typifies the Synapsida. So lizards, snakes, monitor lizards are all Diapsida. And finally, the last one is Erythrosuchus, the archosaurs. So that's the last fossil for today, for this track. So the archosaurs have a diapsid skull with two temporal fenestra plus extra openings in front of the eye and on the lower jaw. So the one in front of the eye is called the antorbital fenestra, and the one on the lower jaw is called the mandibular fenestra. So here, if you look at that guy, which looks very much like a dinosaur, but it's actually closer to a crocodile. So that guy was found in Aliwal North, in the Eastern Cape too. And it's the closest thing you can have in South Africa, like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. So first you have to find the orbit. So the orbit is that hole here. Then you have, at the back of the orbit, you have one temporal fenestra, two temporal fenestrae. So the one temporal fenestra is on the top of the skull, the other one is on the side. And then in front of the orbit, you have another opening, which is the antorbital fenestra. And on the lower jaw, here you have the last opening, which is the mandibular fenestra. So the fact that you have the antorbital and mandibular fenestra gives up that this animal belongs to the Archosauria. So this animal here lived in the Triassic, but today crocodiles belong to the Archosauria, so crocodiles are still alive today. So that was the last fossil for today. Thank you, and see you later in class.